When the Ashford family learned that someone had asked for their plain, troublemaking daughter in marriage, they sent her away like a piece of trash being hauled off, a cruel, final act they relished. They had no idea they were handing over the rarest treasure a man like him had ever dreamed of finding. The letter arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning in rural Montana, delivered by a mailman who could barely hide a sly grin. He knew, like everyone in their small town of Willow Creek, what that crisp envelope meant for the Ashfords. When he placed it in the hands of Charles Ashford, the family patriarch, the old man broke the seal expecting mundane news, but found something far better, a golden opportunity. Wyatt Thompson, the most prosperous rancher in the next county, was asking for the hand of an Ashford daughter. At 35, Wyatt had built a cattle empire from nothing. He owned more land than anyone within a 100-mile radius, and his reputation as an honest, hard-working man was legendary. He was the kind of son-in-law any family would kill for. The problem was, Wyatt had specifically asked for Clara Mae. Charles called his wife Helen and their two eldest daughters into the living room, and Marie, the firstborn at 28, sat with the perfect posture she'd mastered since childhood. Isabel, 26, smoothed her elegant dress, a natural grace always surrounding her. They were the family's pride, beautiful, educated, and primed for a perfect marriage. Any man in his right mind would have chosen one of them. "Read this," Charles said, handing over the letter with a smile that never reached his eyes. As Helen read the words aloud, her own smile grew into something unsettling. The daughters exchanged confused glances until their mother reached the part where Wyatt Thompson specifically named 25-year-old Clara Mae as his desired bride. The silence that followed was shattered by a sharp laugh from Anne-Marie. Isabel quickly joined in, and within seconds the room was filled with the sound of cruel, morbid laughter. It was the sound of genuinely perverse satisfaction. "He asked for Clara Mae," Helen repeated, as if to confirm the unbelievable. "The wealthiest, most respected man in the region asked for our Clara Mae in marriage." "This is perfect," Charles declared, clapping his hands together once. "Simply perfect, perfeito. Vamos para o próximo tópico. Agora, vamos mergulhar no passado para mostrar ao público o verdadeiro motivo do pedido de Wyatt. Esta é a revelação que muda tudo, mostrando que ele não foi enganado, mas sim que ele sabe exatamente quem Maria Clara, agora Clara Mae, é. Este é ponto de alta emoção. Ideal para o primeiro call to action. Topic 2. The memory from 5 years ago. Clara Mae wasn't in the room for this conversation. She was out back, tending to her ailing grandmother, a task she'd taken on daily since the elderly woman had fallen ill. It was always Clara Mae who handled the difficult responsibilities, the care no one else wanted to provide, the chores that dirtied your hands or demanded patience. As she applied a cool compress to her grandmother's forehead, she could hear the laughter from the living room. It wasn't unusual for her family to laugh at her expense, but this time felt different, more calculated. She knew that tone all too well. It was the one they used when they were plotting something cruel. What they failed to understand was that Clara Mae's problem was not disobedience, but something they found far more dangerous, an unshakable sense of justice and the courage to act on it. And it was that very courage that had captured Wyatt Thompson's attention 5 years earlier, at an encounter that would change both of their lives forever. 5 years earlier, the Saturday farmers' market in Bozeman was bustling. Vendors shouted their prices, children darted between stalls, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with sweet pastries. Wyatt had come to town for farm supplies, but found himself lingering, captivated by a scene unfolding near a produce stand. 3 young women were examining some artisan goods. 2 of them, clearly the Ashford sisters, handled the items with the delicate care of a privileged upbringing. Their dresses were immaculate, their hair perfect. They were the picture of respectable young ladies. The third, however, seemed to belong to a different world. It was Clara Mae. While her sisters debated fabric quality, her gaze swept across the market, watchful and aware. Her clothes were simple but neat, and her hands weren't soft and protected like her sisters. They were the hands of someone who knew hard work. Then the shouting started. Across the way, a loud, burly vendor was yelling at a frail, elderly man, accusing him of trying to steal a crate of vegetables. The old man, his worn-out jacket bearing the faded insignia of a military veteran, looked terrified, explaining he had merely touched the crate to check its freshness before making an offer. "Thieving trash," the vendor bellowed, drawing a crowd. "Trying to steal my produce in broad daylight." Wyatt watched with rising anger. He knew this vendor, a man notorious for his shady practices. It was obvious he was creating a scene to intimidate the poor old veteran. But before Wyatt could step in, someone else did. Clara Mae had left her sisters and was walking with purpose toward the commotion. Her stride was firm, her shoulders back, and people instinctively made way for her. "Stop this right now," she said, her voice clear and strong, planting herself between the vendor and the veteran. The authority in her tone made the vendor pause. "And who are you to be giving me orders, girlie?" he sneered. "I'm someone who's been watching this stand for the last 10 minutes and saw exactly what happened," Clara Mae replied, crossing her arms. "This gentleman touched the crate for 3 seconds, asked the price, and when you told him it was double the normal rate, he thanked you and walked away. He never tried to take a thing." The crowd began to murmur in agreement. Several others confirmed her account. Realizing he was losing control, the vendor sputtered, "You're lying to protect a thief." That's when Clara Mae did something that left Wyatt utterly impressed. She reached into her purse, pulled out a few bills, and held them out. How much for the vegetables?" she asked calmly. Confused, the vendor mumbled, $40. "Here's $40, she said, pressing the money into his hand. "Now they're mine." She then turned to the elderly man and handed him the entire crate. "For you, sir. For your family." The old man was in shock, but she insisted with such gentle sincerity that he finally accepted, tears welling in his eyes. As he walked away, clutching the crate like a treasure, Wyatt saw her sisters approach, their faces a mixture of shame and fury. "Clara Mae, what have you done?" Anne-Marie hissed. "What was right," she answered simply. "You just spent our family's money on a total stranger. Dad is going to be furious." "Then I'll explain it to him," Clara Mae said. Her composure unshaken, her sisters dragged her away, muttering about her inappropriate behavior, but Wyatt kept watching as she walked off, head held high, without a hint of regret. In that moment, something ignited within Wyatt. He had just witnessed a person of true character, someone who acted on their conscience, regardless of the social or financial cost. He discreetly asked around and learned about the Ashford family. The 2 older sisters were known for their beauty, the youngest for being troublesome, but from the town's working folk he heard stories of her small, uncelebrated acts of kindness. Wyatt knew which version was true. From that day on, Clara Mae Ashford was never far from his thoughts. If you believe that a person's true value lies in their character, not their appearance, and you want to be part of a community that celebrates stories like this one, then join our family by subscribing now. That way, you won't miss the journey that's about to unfold. Excelente. Agora voltamos ao presente. Na sala dos Ashford, este tópico detalha a conspiração da família e, crucialmente, o momento em que Clara Mae ouve tudo. É aqui que sua dor se transforma em determinação. Este é um ótimo ponto para engajar o público com um pedido de comentários, aproveitando a forte carga emocional da cena. Topic 3. The plot and the painful truth back in the Ashfords' living room. The family's conspiracy took shape. Charles paced back and forth, a cruel smirk on his face. 5 years, Charles muttered, stopping suddenly. 5 years we've been dealing with the trouble this girl causes, and now, out of the blue, a man like that specifically asks for her. Anne-Marie gracefully tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Dad, do you think he knows about the incidents? Impossible, Helen answered with certainty. Wyatt Thompson lives 2 counties away. If he knew half of her reputation, he would never have made this offer. Isabel rose and walked to the window, watching Clara Mae hanging laundry out back. Look at her, she said with disdain. Always so serious, always working. No man from around here would have her. It's obvious this rancher has no idea what he's getting into. And that, Charles said, slamming his fist on the table in satisfaction, is precisely what makes this so perfect. He's expecting a proper submissive wife. Imagine his surprise when he discovers he chose our Clara Mae. The malice in their plan was devastatingly simple. They would accept Wyatt's offer, but say nothing of Clara Mae's true personality. They would let him discover on his own that he had married the most troublesome daughter in the family. By the time he figures out what kind of woman she really is, Charles continued, it'll be too late. The wedding will be over, and she'll be his problem, not ours. Helen folded the letter neatly, and the best part is, she'll be far enough away that she can't interfere in our business anymore. 2 counties away is a blessing. What they didn't know was that just outside, Clara Mae had stopped her work. Leaning against the wall by the open window, she had heard every single word. Her heart pounded in her chest. Their words echoed in her mind like stones thrown into calm water. His problem, not ours. Too late, a blessing. This is how they saw her. A burden to be dumped on the first man willing to take her. Clara Mae closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cool wood of the house. For 25 years, she had tried to earn their love and respect. She had cared for her sick grandmother, handled the toughest chores, and tried to be a good daughter. But none of it mattered, because she had committed the unforgivable crime of having a conscience. And now, they had finally found a way to get rid of her for good. The tears she had held back for years finally streamed down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a painful, liberating release. She finally, truly understood that she would never be loved by these people, no matter what she did. To them, she would always be the family defect, the daughter who was born wrong. As she wiped her tears with the back of her hand, Clara Mae made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to get rid of her so desperately, if they considered sending her to a stranger a fitting punishment, then she would turn it into her victory. She would not go to this wedding as a victim. She would go as a woman who finally understood her own worth, regardless of her family's opinion. If Wyatt Thompson discovered who she really was and decided to reject her, she would at least have the dignity of knowing she hadn't lied about her own nature. It's a heartbreaking moment, but also a powerful one. What do you think of Clara Mae's decision? Would you have confronted the family right then and there, or would you do what she did and take the chance at a new life? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. While the Ashfords plotted their supposed revenge 40 miles away, Wyatt Thompson faced an entirely different kind of dilemma. Sitting on his porch at sunset, watching his cattle graze in the lush green fields of his ranch, he'd been staring at a blank sheet of paper for over an hour, trying to find the right words. It wasn't the first time he'd considered marriage. At 35, Wyatt had achieved more than most men do in a lifetime. His ranch was thriving, his business was respected, and he had more than enough to support a large family. But whenever he thought of settling down, the face that came to mind wasn't one of the conventionally beautiful and well-mannered women from the area. It was always Clara Mae. For 5 years, he had carried the memory of that day at the farmer's market like a steady flame in his chest. Not a week had gone by that he didn't think of her, wondering what kind of woman she had become. and if she still possessed the same fiery spirit that had impressed him so deeply. Wyatt had made a few discreet inquiries about the Ashford family over the years. He learned of Charles's questionable business deals, of Anne-Marie and Isabel's attempts to marry into influential families, and most importantly, of Clara Mae's constant interference in local corruption. For any other man, this information would have been a field of red flags, a clear warning to stay away. For Wyatt, it was confirmation. Clara Mae was exactly who he thought she was, a woman of integrity, living in a family that neither understood nor valued it. He knew that specifically asking for her would raise questions. Social custom dictated he should choose one of the older, prettier, more suitable sisters for a man of his standing. But Wyatt had learned to distrust social custom when it conflicted with the instincts of his heart. The truth was, he didn't want a decorative wife. He didn't want someone who would just agree with him, keep the house tidy, and raise the children. Wyatt wanted a partner, in the truest sense of the word. Someone he could share not just a bed and a table with, but his values, his dreams, and his worries about what was right and wrong in the world. And from what he had seen and discovered, Clara Mae was the only woman he knew who possessed those qualities. Finally, he dipped his pen in ink and began to write. His words were carefully chosen, respectful yet direct. He introduced himself, mentioned his property and financial standing, and then made the request he knew would shock the family. He wished to ask for the hand of Miss Clara Mae Ashford in marriage. He didn't mention his true reasons. He didn't speak of the market, of his admiration for her courage, or of the 5 years he had spent thinking about her. But he did write with sincerity about his desire to find a partner who valued honesty and integrity as much as he did. After sending the letter, he tried to keep busy with the endless work of the ranch, but his thoughts kept returning to it, picturing it traveling down the dusty road toward Clara Mae's town. 3 days later, the reply arrived. He recognized Charles Ashford's masculine handwriting, but when he read the contents, the sheer speed and eagerness of the acceptance felt off. The letter was cordial but too brief. It was as if the family was desperate to close the deal, to ship Clara Mae off as quickly as possible. He wondered if there was something he didn't know about her. A health issue, perhaps? A recent scandal the family wanted to hide? But then he remembered the woman who had defended a stranger at the market, and he decided he would face whatever challenges came his way. On Monday, Clara Mae would arrive, and he would finally find out if 5 years of waiting had been worth it. Ok, seguimos em frente. Este tópico é a jornada, tanto literal quanto emocional. Cobre a partida de Clara Mae, o rompimento final com seu passado e sua chegada ao rancho de Wyatt. A tensão e a esperança atingem o pico no momento em que eles finalmente se encontram, preparando o terreno para a conversa que definirá tudo. Topic 5. The journey to a new life, Monday, arrived with a grey, overcast sky that perfectly mirrored the mood at the Ashford house. Clara Mae had been awake since before dawn, her mind racing. She had spent the last week in quiet preparation, packing her few belongings into a small, worn suitcase that had belonged to her grandmother. More importantly, she had spent hours steeling herself for her meeting with Wyatt Thompson. She was terrified of his potential rejection. But she held on to one fundamental truth. She would rather be rejected for who she was than be accepted for a lie. Downstairs, breakfast was a silent, tense affair. Charles and Helen exchanged satisfied glances, while Anne-Marie and Isabel could barely contain their joy at finally seeing Clara Mae leave. The only person who seemed genuinely sad was her grandmother, who held Clara Mae's hand with trembling fingers. "You're going to be happy, my girl," the old woman whispered, her words a beacon of hope. "You have a good heart. That always finds its place in the world. Clara Mae kissed her forehead, fighting back tears. It was the only goodbye that mattered. The car service arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. "Have a wonderful trip, dear," Charles said, his display of affection feeling utterly fake. "We hope you'll be very happy in your new life. Do write to us," Helen added, though her tone suggested she neither expected nor wanted any letters. From the porch, her sisters waved, their smiles too bright to be sincere. Clara Mae got into the car without looking back. The 4-hour drive wound through roads that cut between rolling hills and sprawling fields. As the car drew closer to its destination, the landscape began to change. The properties became larger, the fences straighter, the livestock healthier. They were entering a region of true prosperity, built on hard work, not on the questionable deals her father made. Finally, the driver announced they had arrived at the Thompson Ranch. Clara Mae looked out the window, and her breath caught. The property was stunning, not ostentatious but solid and beautifully planned. A large, welcoming main house was surrounded by well-organized barns and stables. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of a place run by someone with true expertise and care. But it was the man who stepped out of the house to greet her that truly captured her attention. Wyatt Thompson was taller than she remembered, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of physical labor. But it was his eyes that made her recognize him instantly. They were the same intelligent, observant eyes that had watched her in the market 5 years ago. He had been there. He had seen her. She was sure of it now. The way he looked at her as the driver helped her from the car was not the look of a man meeting a stranger. It was the look of recognition. "Miss Ashford," he said, his voice deep and calm, carrying a kindness that stirred something inside her. "Welcome to the ranch." "Mr. Thompson," she replied with a small curtsy. "Thank you for receiving me." He took her suitcase from the driver and gestured toward the house. "You must be tired from the trip. Please, come inside where we can talk more comfortably." As they walked side by side toward the porch, Clara Mae felt a strange mix of nerves and relief. There was a groundedness to Wyatt's presence that was deeply calming. He didn't seem like the type of man to make snap judgments. But she still had no idea that Wyatt had spent 5 years imagining this very moment, that he had asked for her hand not in spite of her reputation, but because of it, and that her family, believing they were playing a cruel prank, had just delivered him the greatest gift of his life. Perfeito. Chegamos ao momento mais importante da história até agora. Este tópico é a conversa honesta entre Clara Mae e Wyatt. É aqui que os segredos são revelados e as verdadeiras intenções vêm à tona. A cena é projetada para validar completamente o valor de Clara Mae e solidificar Wyatt como o herói que a enxerga de verdade, estabelecendo as bases para o romance que virá. Topic 6. A Foundation of Truth. The living room of Wyatt's house was simple but welcoming. Solid wood furniture, shelves lined with books, and a stone fireplace gave the room a feeling of warmth and stability. Clara Mae sat in a comfortable armchair, trying to hide the nerves fluttering in her chest. Wyatt served coffee in delicate china cups, a touch of refinement she hadn't expected. "How was the trip?" he asked, sitting in the chair across from her. There was a respectful distance between them, but she noticed he watched her intently, as if trying to read her expression. "It was fine, thank you," she replied, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. "Your ranch is beautiful. It must have taken years to build all of this." 15 years of steady work," Wyatt said with quiet pride. "But a property this size is meant for a family. An empty house, no matter how big, is still just an empty house." A quiet moment passed between them. Clara Mae knew the time for small talk was over. This was the moment that would decide everything. "Mr. Thompson," she began, setting her cup down, "I need to ask you a direct question." "Please," he said, leaning forward slightly, his attention fully on her. Why did you ask for me, specifically? My sisters are prettier, better educated in the ways a wife is expected to be. Any sensible man would have chosen one of them. Wyatt was silent for a long moment, studying her face. She saw a decision being made in his eyes. May I be just as direct, Miss Ashford? Please do, because I saw you at a farmer's market 5 years ago, he said plainly. I saw what you did for that old man who was being falsely accused. I saw you spend your own money to buy him that crate of vegetables, expecting nothing in return. Clara Mae felt a blush rise to her cheeks. You were there? I was. And I've spent the last 5 years thinking about the woman who had the courage to do what was right, even knowing her family would disapprove. He leaned forward even more, his gaze unwavering. Miss Ashford, I'm not looking for a pretty silent wife. I want a partner. A partner with the moral strength to do the right thing, especially when it's hard. His words hit her like a lightning bolt. Her entire life, her family had criticized her for the very qualities this man was now praising. It felt as if the world had been turned upside down. But you have to know, she said, finding the courage to be completely honest, that my family considers me a problem. They sent me here because they want to get rid of me, not because they think I would be a good wife for you. I suspected as much, Wyatt replied calmly. The speed with which they accepted my proposal was revealing, and knowing that you still want to marry me. Wyatt stood and walked to the window, looking out at the fields stretching toward the horizon. Clara Mae, he said, turning back to face her. I could have married any one of a dozen women over the past decade, all of them beautiful from respectable families. All of them would have been sensible choices. But every time I considered it, I thought of that young woman at the market, and no one else could compare to that memory. Tears pricked her eyes. You don't truly know me. I might disappoint you, or you might be exactly what my life has been missing, he said, returning to his seat. Clara Mae, may I make a proposal? What kind of proposal? Let's spend the next few weeks getting to know each other, truly, with no pressure and no impossible expectations. If at the end of that time we find we are compatible, we'll get married. If not, he paused, his expression serious and kind, I will help you find a suitable situation. Whether that means returning to your family with my full support, or finding another arrangement that makes you happy. The generosity of his offer left her speechless. You would do that? Even if I decided not to marry you? I would. Because a woman of your character deserves to have choices in life. Not just be pushed from one unhappy situation to another, for the first time in years. Clara Mae felt a feeling she had almost forgotten. Hope. I accept your proposal, she said slowly, but on one condition. Which is that you are also completely honest with me about your expectations, your fears, your dreams. If we are truly going to get to know each other, it has to go both ways. A genuine smile spread across Wyatt's face, the first she had seen. It's a deal. They shook hands to seal the agreement, and Clara Mae felt an unexpected current pass between them at his touch. There was something about this man that made her feel both safe and challenged, as if he could handle her strength without ever trying to diminish it. Ótimo! Agora que a base de honestidade foi estabelecida, podemos construir o romance. Este tópico é o coração da história de amor. Ele mostra como a parceria deles floresce e como a admiração mútua se transforma em paixão. A cena avança de conversas profundas para o primeiro beijo e um pedido de casamento verdadeiro. É outro pico de emoção, perfeito para o segundo CTA Topic Set. The weeks of discovery, the weeks that followed felt like a dream to Clara Mae. For the first time in her life, she was in an environment where her opinions were not just tolerated, but actively sought. Wyatt was true to his promise of complete honesty. During long walks across the property, he shared his plans to expand the cattle operation. his dreams of building a small community school for his workers' children, and his worries about the droughts that sometimes plagued the region. Clara Mae, in turn, discovered she had valuable ideas about running a ranch, ideas born from a lifetime of quiet observation. What if you built a series of connected rainwater collection systems? She suggested one afternoon as they watched workers haul water to a distant pasture. That way, even during a dry spell, you'd have significant reserves. Wyatt stopped walking and looked at her with open admiration. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Because you think like a man who has always had resources, she answered honestly. I think like someone who grew up watching good people suffer from a lack of planning. It was these moments that made Wyatt's heart beat faster. Clara Mae didn't just have an admirable sense of justice. She had a practical intelligence that perfectly complemented his own skills. But it wasn't just the practicalities of life that brought them closer. During long conversations on the porch as the sun set, they discovered an emotional compatibility that surprised them both. Tell me about your family, Wyatt asked one evening. After a moment's hesitation, she kept her promise of honesty. They see me as a mistake. Someone born with flaws they couldn't fix. What kind of flaws? I care too much about strangers. I ask inconvenient questions. I can't pretend I don't see injustice. She looked down at her hands. My mother always said a lady should be like a pretty doll, seen but not heard. Wyatt was quiet for a long time. And what do you think? I think a life without purpose isn't a life worth living. Exactly, Wyatt said with conviction. Clara Mae, do you know the difference between you and your sisters? They are beautiful, they are decorative. You are transformative. He turned to face her fully. Your sisters can brighten up a room, but you can change a life. You can transform a community. That is infinitely more valuable. His words touched something deep in her soul. For the first time, someone saw her supposed flaws, not just as acceptable, but as virtues. They were beginning to find in each other what the rest of the world couldn't see. If this is the kind of love story that warms your heart, and you're rooting for them to build their new life together, make sure you're subscribed. You'll become part of a community that believes true love is about finding someone who sees the best in you. As the days passed, the attraction between them grew into an intense, natural chemistry. It was in the long glances across the dinner table, the casual touches that lingered, the way her heart fluttered whenever he smiled at her. One night, as they walked in the garden under a canopy of brilliant stars, Wyatt stopped suddenly. Clara Mae, he began, his voice serious. I'm falling in love with you. Not with the memory I held onto for 5 years, but with the real, incredible woman you are. Her heart felt like it would burst. Wyatt, I know we promised no pressure, he continued, and I'll stand by that. If you need more time, or if you don't feel the same, I feel the same, she interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. I'm falling in love with you too, for your kindness, your honesty, for the way you make me feel like I can finally be myself without any fear. He stepped closer, gently raising a hand to cup her face. May I kiss you? In response, Clara Mae rose onto her toes and met his lips with hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration, but it deepened into a passion that sent a tremor through them both. When they finally parted, they remained in each other's arms, knowing that something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer two strangers testing a possibility. They were two people who had found something rare and precious in each other. Marry me, Wyatt whispered against her hair. Not because of an arrangement, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Yes, Clara Mae answered, without a single shred of doubt. Yes, I'll marry you. Excelente. Estamos nos aproximando do clímax da história. Este tópico é a confrontação final. O passado de Clara Mae volta para testá-la, mas agora ela não está mais sozinha e frágil. Esta cena é projetada para ser um momento de maior empoderamento para a protagonista, proporcionando uma conclusão satisfatória para o conflito com sua família. Topic 8. The past comes knocking. The wedding took place on a sun-drenched Saturday morning. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with a genuine emotion that touched everyone present. The Ashford family did not attend. They sent only a cold, brief letter with their congratulations, which Clara Mae read without emotion before tossing it into the fireplace. That part of her life was over. Her new life was just beginning. The church was filled not with wealthy socialites, but with the ranch workers and their families, old friends of Wyatt's, and even a few humble townspeople Clara Mae had helped over the years. A crowd of people who genuinely loved them. 3 months later, life on the ranch was better than either of them had imagined. Their partnership thrived, with Clara Mae's innovative ideas, from new irrigation systems to a small but functional schoolhouse for the workers' children. The ranch was becoming a model of both prosperity and social responsibility. Then, one afternoon, a familiar luxury car kicked up dust as it drove up the long road to their house. It was her father. Clara Mae's first instinct was a flicker of panic, but it vanished as soon as it came. She was no longer the rejected, vulnerable daughter. She was Clara Mae Thompson, mistress of her own home, married to a man who respected her. Wyatt came out of the house as he heard the car, standing naturally by his wife's side, his presence a silent wall of support. Charles Ashford stepped out of the car with an expression Clara Mae had never seen on him before, a mixture of discomfort and something that looked almost like respect. Clara Mae, he said, tipping his hat. Wyatt, he nodded curtly at her husband. Father, she replied, her voice cool. What brings you here? Charles looked around at the thriving property, clearly impressed. I came to discuss some business. What kind of business? Wyatt asked, his arm resting protectively around Clara Mae's waist. Charles took a deep breath. You may have heard about the troubles back in Willow Creek. The councilman was arrested for corruption. Several families are being investigated for their part in illegal land deals. And our family? Clara Mae asked, already knowing the answer. Our family, he said, unable to meet her eyes, may be facing some financial difficulties. The irony was overwhelming. The very schemes she had tried to warn them about years ago were finally bringing them down. And what does that have to do with us? Wyatt asked plainly. Charles looked directly at Clara Mae. I was hoping you might intercede for us. Perhaps use your influence with your husband to help us financially through this difficult time. The silence that followed was heavy. Clara Mae looked at the man who had spent 25 years making her feel worthless, who had sent her away as a punishment, who had celebrated when he thought he was finally rid of her. Father, she said finally, her voice calm but firm. My whole life you told me I was a problem, that my conscience was a defect. You sent me here believing you were playing a cruel joke on my husband. Charles looked down, thoroughly shamed. But now that you need help, suddenly my influence is worth something. She continued, Clara Mae, you're our daughter. No, she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. A daughter is loved, protected, and valued. I was a burden you couldn't wait to discard. The only difference is, you thought you were punishing me, but in reality, you gave me the greatest gift of my life. Wyatt squeezed her hand gently. A silent show of support. I will not help you financially, she stated clearly. Not because I lack compassion, but because helping you would mean enabling the very corruption I have always fought against. You made your choices. Now you must live with the consequences. Charles's face turned red with anger. After everything we did for you, what did you do for me? She challenged. Make me feel inadequate for having a conscience? Punish me for doing the right thing? You did the bare minimum the law requires of a parent, but you never loved me for who I am. Wyatt has known me for a few months, and he values me more than you have in my entire life. Furious, Charles turned to Wyatt. And you're going to allow your wife to speak to her own father this way? Wyatt smiled, a cold, hard smile. Mr. Ashford, my wife is free to express her opinions. In fact, her courage to do so is exactly why I married her. It's the same courage you spent her whole life trying to destroy. Realizing he was defeated, Charles stormed back to his car. Before driving off, he shouted one last time, "You'll regret this!" As the car disappeared down the road, Clara Mae turned to her husband. "Did I do the right thing?" "You did the only thing a woman like you could do," he said, kissing her forehead. "And I love you even more for it." That night, as they sat together in their dining room, now truly and peacefully their own, Clara Mae reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. The family that had tried to throw her away like trash was now begging for her help. The man who was supposed to be the victim of a cruel joke had become her greatest love and her strongest ally. "You know what's so ironic about all of this?" she said to Wyatt, a small smile on her face. "What's that? My parents truly believed they were playing a prank on you. They thought they were sending their defective daughter to ruin your life." Wyatt laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the room. "And they will never, ever understand," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "that they gave me the exact treasure I had been searching for my entire life." Clara Mae's heart filled with gratitude. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the cruelest curses. "And sometimes," Wyatt added, squeezing her hand, "the people who try to hurt us the most only end up pushing us directly toward our true destiny." They finished their dinner in quiet contentment, secure in the beautiful and solid life they had built together, a partnership based on mutual respect, true love, and shared values. Clara Mae would never again be the rejected daughter. She was now the beloved wife, the respected partner, the woman who had found her place in the world beside someone who saw her exactly as she was, perfect in her imperfection, valuable in her authenticity, and loved completely. And so concludes another story that reminds us of the profound power of being true to ourselves. If you were moved by Clara Mae and Wyatt's journey and want to continue receiving stories that touch the heart and celebrate inner strength, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. You'll be joining a growing community that believes kindness and character are what truly matter. Before you go, I have one question for you. Has there ever been a moment in your life that felt like a curse at the time, but turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Share your experience in the comments below. Stories like these are powerful, and they deserve to be told and heard. Thank you for being here and for being part of this special community. You are the reason this channel exists. We'll see you in the next story.